Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Uh-oh. Well, hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Time once again for another show. In the middle of breakfast. I don't know. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. Just thought I'd eat in your ear in the first thing in the morning. I don't know what made me think I had time to do this today. I don't know what's making me think I have time to do this any day. But usually, school keeps us organized. But today, no. Instead, we just did whatever the hell we wanted to do. So, this is us winging it and trying not to totally eat in your ear. But, you know, soon Greg Dworkin will be around. And I'll be able to mute the microphone and quickly eat in between saying, oh, yes, right. Oh, I forgot that story. Oh, yes, right. I meant to talk about that. And, oh, no, I can't believe that that's still happening with the pandemic. So, all right, well, that's the show for the first hour anyway, in a nutshell, from my end of things. But let's see what's been going on this morning. Look, my coronavirus tracker has showed up this morning from the New York Times, which has brought back the local report. I guess I had to, they made me click on something to actually declare where I am. Oh, look, although it didn't work, the edit buttons place still thinks I'm in New York City. New York City? Well, it's not true. But I do note for the record that New York City is under extreme transmission of the virus. How do I make it save then? I don't know. Well, okay. I guess if I click in, they won't email me what's going on. But if I click in and tell them I'm in Loudoun County, that is enough for them. Then they'll put it at the bottom of the list here. Let's see, our 14-day change up 104% in transmission of the virus. That's nice. Versus 342% for New York City, of course. The 14-day change in deaths per 100,000, up 40% in New York City, up a whopping 338% here in Loudoun County. So, not doing so great about getting people, I guess, to the hospital and treated early enough. They must think that it's just a passing cold and think it's just the flu or not, something quite like it, and not doing enough to get themselves treated. Is he going to tell me whether this is an extreme level of transmission here in Loudoun County? Apparently not. I'm not really sure what the point of the email is, but that was a handy, green to red scale that they had for us, and we've been sitting for a while at very high here in Loudoun County, and I was wondering whether we had made it over to the red extreme. That was something we were using when school was in to determine whether or not, for instance, we would be, attending. So, well, we'll see what happens over the next 2 weeks. If it is a very short spike in Omicron, then I suppose everything goes back on track as planned before the break. Now starts the race to try and get all of the kids their third shots inside of the 2-week break that we've got. So everybody, the appointments are going fast and furious. Kids are getting vaccinated in the hopes that they'll be fully protected 2 weeks after the shot in time to get back to school. And I don't think it's going to happen for everybody because we have to space things out. We've only got the 2 weeks to fit in all the shots, plus all the adults who want their shots. So, we're working on it, and we'll work on. I think we'll keep the appointments we've got, and then try and do a walk-in early. See if we can get the shot earlier than expected, and if so, go back and cancel that appointment. That's our game plan anyway for getting the injections taken care of. And we're having some difficulty filling out the online sign-up forms for one of our kids who got the Johnson & Johnson shot, as lots of kids did on college campuses. And a lot of the shots, if you're looking to get a Pfizer shot for your, what we had decided would be your third in the series instead of calling it the booster, but if you're a Johnson & Johnson patient, it's your second shot, but it's the equivalent of a third, I guess, and there's no Yeah, and in the hastily prepared sign-up sheets, I guess, there's no button on some of the pages from some of the pharmacies that are administering the vaccine, and no easy way online. Once you get there, they can figure it out easily enough, I suppose. But to let them know that you've taken the Johnson & Johnson shot but want to switch to Pfizer, and what you're asking for is a third, what they're referring to on their pages as a third shot. And then in order to sign up, they ask you how many doses of vaccine have you had, and the answer is 1 for Johnson & Johnson. And then once you click the Johnson & Johnson, some sites don't really then want to offer you the Pfizer alternative, but everyone should. But I think in person, when you get there, all the pharmacists know exactly what you're talking about and say, oh, okay, well, I'll just write here on your card, Pfizer, date, and the lot number and batch, and you just go your merry way. But the computers don't like it in the meantime. It's like the Y2K problem, I suppose. You know, the year was coming. The computers didn't know, or supposedly wouldn't know what year it was, but the rest of us did, and it was okay, and you could correct for it in your head. Speaking of, we're correcting for miscalculating the timing of breakfast in my head by inviting Greg Dworkin to join us today with his raft of stories. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. I came on so you could take a few bites.
Right.
And you're right. It is exactly like Y2K. You may not remember, but exactly what happened in Y2K is that the computers couldn't handle the turn of the century. So what happened is they hired a bunch of pharmacists who could handle the turn of the century in their head, and they just fixed everything.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it'll all work out just fine, and I guess if the card looks funny, I don't care as long as he's got the shot. Which reminds me, actually, the card itself is back at it's in his desk at school where it belongs. So in case he needed to show it to the authorities, and then not realizing he would need it for the booster, they're just issuing people new cards every once in a while, though. That's happening too.
Well, the other way is the CDC was tracking, and you can go to the CDC site if you did it early enough so that they have it on record and print that out. And that's what I had for a while. I was taking the CDC, yes, you had to, and leaving my card home where it was safe. So there's a number of different ways to do it. Here in Connecticut, my personal experience is, first of all, I needed to go pick up some non-COVID related medication from the pharmacy, my local pharmacy, the CVS, and they were not taking walk-ins. They had every booster slot booked, and it was a very orderly scene in the store. You'd have people walking in and say, "Can I walk in?" No, you have to go online and make a reservation. But for those who had done that, it was like every 10 minutes, boom, 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 and 3 or 4 people waiting, but a constant 3 or 4 people waiting as a turnover. So that seemed to be fairly smooth. And my own son, who lives in Berkeley, California, couldn't get a booster there because there were just literally no appointments. It isn't just that, okay, well, I'll sign up for 6 months from now. You can't make an appointment. We're full everywhere. So he waited till he came home to Connecticut to get one. So I'm taking him tonight.
All right.
And, it was not incredibly difficult to find a slot in a reasonable time frame. It wasn't at the pharmacy we wanted, but it was within 20 minutes. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Reminder for everybody who's looking, helpful tool for us was vaccinefinder.org. And that's out there, and you can plug in your zip code or address or what have you, and a range in which you're willing to travel, and it'll bring up all the places. You can filter by places that have appointments or don't have appointments. The appointments might not be when you want, but
yeah, exactly. Around here, there seem to be as many CVSs as there are Starbucks in New York City. So you just go to the CVS site and find which CVS has the one you want, which CVS has the appointment, which CVS is within range, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a pain in the neck, and you got to check each one individually, but that's the only way for them to track the appointments. But it shows you how many choices you've got, and also you'll probably find a couple of pharmacies you didn't know existed, and might be good backups for you in the future.
Right, so you never know. So the main stories are still the main stories. That is to say, the maneuvering around Joe Manchin on the one hand, and the pandemic on the other. But I think that off and on creeping into the news for a day with a splash and then disappearing, and then a day and then disappearing, is the work that the committee, not just the January 6th committee, but also the committee looking into what the heck happened with the response to the pandemic from the Trump administration.
Yes, there is one.
There is one, and some pretty amazing stuff is coming out of it. Previously, that committee had issued some emails about Tony Fauci and Francis Collins talking about basically how they had to crush Scott Atlas and the herd immunity people, otherwise we were all going to die. So I thought that was interesting. And then what came out since yesterday is the emails that Deborah Birx had about her role, which were really fascinating. Right. Which is, you want to involve me in the idea that the medical experts endorse herd immunity? I need to go out of town.
Yeah, you're not going to have me.
I'm not going to stand up there and say you're crazy, but you guys are nuts. I'll have nothing to do with this, and maybe the best way to deal with this, since I want to give cover to the Trump administration any way I can. That's in the email.
She did offer that.
I'll just leave.
Yeah, I mean, now we understand a little bit better what she was doing. But I mean,
well, at the time, you may recall, I had a lot more criticism for her than I did Fauci. Yeah. And so there you have the two emails backing it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd still say the same thing. You mentioned there. Yes, she's saying you're crazy, but no, she's not saying, and I'm going to tell everybody because it's going to save a lot of lives. It's still
right. We said at the time, she's not Scott Atlas. Yeah. She's not pushing crazy stuff. Yeah. It's that she knows better and she's not fighting it.
Yeah, that was
the criticism.
Sad and disappointing, but okay.
And true. It turns out to be incredibly accurate because that's exactly what was going on.
And now she's not the famous savior of America. Too bad.
Yeah, and then she had a rehab tour that didn't work out well. So that was happening. As far as the January 6th committee, they've put their sights on Scott Perry. They want him. Scott Perry, not Rick Perry, is a representative from the United States Congress. So they're requesting some information from one of their own. Yeah, for the first time.
Get rid of all the
And, of course, Perry said, I'm not going to have anything to do with you guys.
Right. And
you belong to an illegitimate body, the House of Representatives.
Yes, that's true. I'm surprised, again, at all these people who think they have the authority to say things like this because they're elected members of Congress and who don't believe in the integrity of the election, which, I mean, I suppose you should extend them the courtesy of saying, I can't actually help you. You might not be a member of Congress. Sorry. But no one's taken that route yet.
Yeah, well, I would say that to Marjorie Taylor Greene because, it's just a matter of time.
Sure. But, if you're a member of Congress,
Perry,
tell me what committee you're on.
People don't know who Scott Perry is. And so the story is talking about it. A little-known congressman named Scott Perry is at the center because he was the first one to be asked. Yeah. Not the known seditionists, not Mo Brooks, not Andy Gibbs, not Jim Jordan, but the known one.
Well, I feel like they're maybe going in chronological order. I don't know why Scott Perry isn't more famous. He made a small splash early in the run-up to what became the insurrection, and then the other guys were the stars of the day. But he was
because they were on the committees and on TV. But the thing is that Scott Perry is picked for one big reason.
Lie. Yeah,
Scott Perry is the guy who's responsible for putting Jeffrey Clark at Department of Justice and pushing Jeffrey Clark should take over line of reasoning.
Rings a bell. Okay, yeah, he was an early adopter of the big lie. And involved himself in the mechanism of trying to push the weird theory, and not coincidentally, well, I guess coincidentally since they're not related, the similar theory to what the other weirdo Perry was doing, Rick Perry. The two Perrys, all the Perrys, Republican Perrys in government, were all early urging the Trump administration to try the various weird conspiracy theory related methods of overturning the election. But then Perry kind of fell by the wayside. I guess he turned his focus. He's from Pennsylvania, I believe. Yeah. And I think he turned his focus to trying to get the Pennsylvania state legislature to void their results.
To take Borax and undo what they did.
Right. Well, how come he didn't? Yeah, he didn't prescribe any medication. Nobody ever tried a medical approach to reversing the election. They should have combined their efforts.
He wanted to take legislative borax.
Yeah.
So to me, again, I'm a layperson. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on the internets.
I
But
am
to
the
me,
borax.
what it looks like is the difference between Rick Perry and Scott Perry is
Yeah.
doing your homework. And what I mean by that is the committee looks like they interviewed 700 some odd people and got information
odd
about
people.
what was going on and built their case as to who they needed to talk to. And then towards the end, and we are getting towards the end because in a couple of weeks they'll be on TV talking about this, they say, okay, well, all of the information we have seems to implicate Scott Perry as the guy who's trying to subvert the Department of Justice, completely different charge than, obstructing a official congressional process.
Yeah.
And so we have information from all these other people. And so at the end, so Scott Perry, you're the guy everybody's pointing a finger at. We'd like you to come and talk to us about what's going on here. And Perry said, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, well, that's not going to go very well.
That's different than Rick Perry, who out of the blue, nobody expected, everybody had forgotten about. And to be totally fair, it wasn't Rick Perry, it was Rick Perry's phone.
Right, that's all we've proven so far.
That sent a text saying, you guys ought to overthrow the government without waiting for results of the election, because that's the way we do things in Texas.
Yeah, he butt dialed that whole thing, typed out that whole message just by wiggling around. While he was dancing with
So
the
that
stars.
to me, is the implication there. And that's why when I was putting together a good news thread for this morning, because everybody needs good news, one of the things I didn't have, but I did set aside because I was talking about COVID and thought this was too political, is Larry Sabato saying, time for some good news. Despite all the obstacles, the GOP and far right, excuse redundancy, have placed in the way of the January 6th committee. It's clearly making real progress. Long way to go, but justice matters, and Trump on down must pay dearly for their sedition. I personally think Trump on down should pay dearly for killing 800,000, Americans by interfering with the initial COVID response.
I feel the same way, and I'm confusing myself each day when I think of the reasons why I want to say that there ought never to be a Trump state funeral. It was originally with different ideas in mind, but now it's sort of merging. Both of these things were enormous betrayals. I mean, they both represent a treason of their own. I mean, I know there's a definition and it's a term of art, but I'm using it slightly differently here. But there was enormous betrayal on the public health front, on the preservation of democracy and peaceful transition of power front. And then, never mind. We haven't even gotten around to. We're going to leave this, I guess, to the New York Attorney General to figure out what his business-oriented corruption was all about as well.
Right, and also,
maneuvering
to give us a nuclear Iran, which didn't have to happen, but he made it happen.
Congratulations.
I mean, there's a long list. So,
Ayatollah Trump
that's important.
finally did it.
And here's another piece of this, which I think is interesting.
Yes.
And Larry Sabato had a follow-up tweet in response to somebody else saying, I'm usually not grateful for errors, but I am indeed thankful for McCarthy's mistake, that's Kevin McCarthy's mistake, in boycotting the January 6th committee, which is something I've said on the air. One of the reasons the committee is so effective is you don't have Jim Jordan, jumping up and down on the table, coming up the works every 5 minutes.
Right, or someone in his place. He's just
but he jumps more. He takes his jacket off more and makes more noise.
Well, Pelosi wasn't going to allow that.
Right, but the point is,
even so,
McCarthy wouldn't play along and put somebody else. You said, he's not the only one. Well, there are other people who could have done that in different ways.
Yeah.
The legislative version of offering borax to the committee, and it didn't happen. And so it was an error because a lot of stuff's going to come out of it. Now, what's going to come out of it is the interesting part, and here's where an actual lawyer would be helpful to discuss.
For one. Yeah,
and I'm not, so I'll discuss it. But so let's say, for the sake of argument,
all right,
January 6th committee does decide that there were things that were done that should not have been done, that the Department of Justice should not have been subverted, that a proper process by Congress should not have been interrupted, as federal judges appear to agree is, in fact, the real thing. So let's say the committee decides those things. What do they do next? And they have two choices. This is one of those black and white things. They can either refer to the Justice Department, or they could not refer to the Justice Department after having outlined why it all matters.
Yes. And the Justice Department can take interest on its own, even if you don't refer
That's the
to
point.
them. Oh,
you know, they don't have to do
I didn't
that.
realize you were
They
going
don't.
there.
They can say, okay, it's a political statement that will get everybody's attention if we refer to the Justice Department the fact that these guys are crooks. Mm-hmm. And it certainly would get a lot of eyeballs, but would also make it incredibly political and put incredible pressure on the Justice Department. Or they could simply make their case so compellingly that the DOJ says, you know what, we have to take this. And it wasn't because they told us to, because they never made a referral.
That's
so
an
which is
interesting
better?
option.
That's what I'm trying to ask the lawyers.
Okay. Well, yeah, well, you'll have to ask the politicians, as it turns out. I mean, the best thing to do, the lawyers will tell you, I guess. I mean, well, you'll get two different answers, too. You'll get answers from the theoreticians and the practitioners. And the theoreticians, who might be more political in their views, might say the optics of it are better, that such that you don't have to deal with the accusation of a partisan referral from a partisan. They still think Republicans will still accuse it of being a partisan body, even though.
See, we proved it's
right.
partisan. They made a referral.
Yeah, and of course it's 7-2 on there, and there's 2 Republicans. Wow. Largely because you guys left.
Referral was made on a Republican president.
Yes, right. So that's what makes it. You're exactly right about how they'll view it. Then there'll be the lawyers who say, "Well, I prefer, sticking to forms and making sure that we dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and a referral, as part of that process and lends some credibility to it." But I think they're working in, they're working in the theoretical realm where they don't have one totally dysfunctional party. On the other hand, it's also worth pointing out that even if they don't make a referral and the Justice Department picks it up, that Republicans will simply say it's being picked up because the Justice Department is partisan, even if the committee isn't, which it is, by the way, and they'll just accuse everyone of partisanship, so you might as well just do it by the book. So,
should that happen, it'll be on the evening news either way.
Yes.
The question is, of course, does DOJ do something about it? That's a completely separate issue. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the legislative branch, not the judicial branch.
That's not
the executive
DOJ
branch
either.
is screwing us. Which of the 2 branches is responsible for trying to undo that mess? And the answer is both. And so I don't know how they work together with this.
Yeah, well, me neither. I guess we'll see how it goes. My guess is, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the committee is going to want to not make a referral. I think they might just say, we know they're going to accuse us of partisanship. That doesn't matter. We did our job right. We'll make a referral because that's what we ought to do with this thing. But
right. Anyway, follow up and end of the thread because I just thought it was good. David Doak writes, folks, I've known Larry Sabato for about 40 years, and for somebody who's measured in his language and opinions to make the above statement, which is the January 6th committee is doing their job, says a lot about where we are.
Too.
There's not a better expert than Professor Sabato. When he talks, you should listen. And he says, thank you. I don't see how anybody that voted to our republic could think there are 2 legitimate sides to this. Either you're for democracy or you aren't. And the latter group should have no standing in America. That sounds like a lawyerly kind of thing to say about standing, right? When I argue with political people, I don't say, look, you're an idiot. I don't say to them, you don't have standing.
You should try that. Of course, that's what people say. If you say clip instead of magazine, you don't have standing to discuss guns.
Well, but again, that as we pointed out in the thread that dealt with it, that's when you're talking about law.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's true. I mean, I guess here you at least are on a legal basis. So, but as arguing with gun nuts goes, if they said, "Well, you don't have standing," that's a step forward, actually, from the tenor of the arguments now you usually have with them.
Again, this is not a prediction that DOJ will do anything. We have no idea. There is absolutely no way to know what they would do with it. Firstly, we don't know what the committee is going to do. Whether it's their presentation that might convince DOJ on their own or whether it's a formal referral. And since we don't know what they're going to do, it's super hard to say, well, what will DOJ do? And that is actually a good segue into talking about the pandemic, believe it or not. And the reason is, and we'll do that after the break, is that there's a big difference between what Nate Silver does well, very well,
I feel
look at the odds and say, okay, what are the chances something like this will happen, or what does it really mean statistically that, let's say, you have a 55% chance of winning, right? It means that you have a 45% chance of not winning, and that's big enough so that they're basically even odds. So if you're betting, be careful how you bet. He's really good at that. Okay. So we could talk about the odds of the committee coming down hard on Trump and Scott Perry and other people, DOJ itself, for being involved in this. And that's a reasonable prediction that people can make. That's very different than therefore predicting what the Department of Justice is going to do. That's impossible. But that's also true with the pandemic, and it's true with elections. You could talk about the odds of something happening, but once you start getting into, so I predict this is going to happen, you're going to be right by luck, and then you're going to think you're a genius.
Okay, well, that's no different than most
things. But that's how people get there.
Yeah,
I was so good at predicting the odds that I said this was going to happen, and it happened, so I'm right. You should listen to me about everything. Well, you happen to be right by coincidence, which was proven by the next 3 times you tried to predict something, and you were completely wrong.
Yeah, right. Well, yes, there's a big
difference. And that's how it works.
How
and so
they
people
get there
on Twitter or reading non-experts really have to be very careful when folks tell you, well, this is going to happen because I decided.
Well, yeah, I guess there are some people who have some view of a historical pattern, but even that doesn't necessarily apply here.
It was true until the Delta thing happened, and then that was true until the oh my God thing happened, and so just be careful with it.
Well, yeah, you'll have to.
Don't be so, be a little humble about your predictions.
The temptation to make a prediction, I think, also grows out of the fact that once you figure out, okay, well, there are only 2 things the committee can decide, either to refer or not refer, and there are 2 things, basically, the Justice Department can decide to do. Pick it up on referral or don't.
And I said those things without predicting what they were going to do.
Right. Now, though, of course, I think people's OCD forces them to reach a conclusion. It's difficult.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or 2 would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, things working out here during the break. Thank you very much. Production staff for the water that I forgot. I poured it out, measured carefully to about this place on the cup, and then left it on the counter. But all right, everything else seems to be going pretty well, and we've got through our first half hour pretty well, thanks to Greg's preparedness. So anything to talk about for the next couple minutes, or what?
Well, so again, we talked about the ability to predict or not predict as being a prelude to talking about the pandemic.
Yes.
So we will talk a little bit about the pandemic. There's some good news on that front. But I just want to finish the last segment by pointing out the obvious, which is something I said as we were going to the break, and I don't remember whether it was pre or post. You can hear this at home, but we're not predicting what the committee will do. We're not predicting what DOJ will do, and everybody who predicted what the DOJ will do with Steve Bannon was wrong.
Well, certainly everybody who said, "Oh, they won't do anything." Yes,
exactly.
Right.
We don't know.
Some people said they
literally don't know what they'll do, so don't try and predict.
It becomes difficult. As you pointed out, there are only 2 things that the committee can do. So you could take a wild guess, or even an educated guess.
Yeah, you have a 50% chance of being right, which is just what the pundits do with elections.
Right, and then when it gets to what the DOJ will do, it has two options on those two options. Two options if the committee refers, and two options if the committee doesn't refer, and it becomes more complicated. Now you're only about 25% likely to get it right at random.
If you intend to go along with both, or 50% if you ignore how it got there and just look at what they do.
Right.
But it's hard. So what we're doing is we're tracking the data about what Omicron looks like overseas and in the U.S., somewhat handicapped in the U.S. because our ability to say what's Omicron and what's Delta isn't all that good just yet.
Oh.
But there's a lot better information from overseas. And so here's one good news piece in the good news thread that I had this morning. This is from South Africa.
All right.
Mia Milan tracks it there, editor-in-chief of one of their publications. And South Africa's Omicron COVID wave seems to have turned cautiously optimistic view. It was a really tough spike, very first tweet in that series. Much steeper wave than previous waves, but also much shorter. So it went up above their previous Delta wave, but has already come down to meet exactly where their previous Delta wave was at its peak.
Okay. Well,
so the down of the Omicron wave is exactly where the highest of the Delta wave was. The up of the Omicron wave before that, it really hit South Africa hard. Steeper wave, significantly shorter, half the number of days to reach the peak compared to previous waves in South Africa. In other words, the curve went directly up, or what we call the Omicron signature, the O signature. The 7-day moving average of new COVID cases for Omicron is looks to be 23,000 versus the Delta peak, which was 19,000. The Beta peak was 19,000. So it's slightly more per 100,000 population.
Okay.
But the important part is not looking at the individual provinces and skipping down to number 9 in the series. The reasons behind fewer hospitalizations and deaths, and therefore less severe disease at this stage in South Africa, could be up to 70% of the population in some provinces already had some sort of infection thanks to the Delta. And vaccination's about 44.5% of adults.
Okay.
So most of the hospitalizations, like we're seeing everywhere else, like we're seeing in the U.S., most of the hospitalizations are the unvaccinated.
Right.
So if you are unvaccinated and you get it, you're going to get just as sick as any other variant.
Okay.
If you're vaccinated or previously infected and you get this, you're not going to be as sick. And that's the cautiously optimistic view of what's going on with this.
Okay.
Now, do we have any evidence in the U.S. that in fact, is happening? And the answer, as of this morning, is yes.
All right. Well, now I know. The answer is yes, everyone.
The reason is New York City tracks really carefully.
Good.
Okay. And so for this particular one, I'm going to give you this series of tweets by Farzad Mostashari, who is an interesting character. He's a prominent public health guy in New York who helped to develop the whole concept of ILI, influenza-like illnesses. So if you have fever and a cough and you go to the emergency room, you're going to be characterized as having an influenza-like illness, ILI. And that's how CDC for years and years and years has tracked flu season, because they don't test everybody for flu.
Right. Okay.
They want to know, do you have pneumonia, meaning you're serious enough to be admitted to the hospital, or do you have an influenza-like illness? We treated you and sent you home. Treat them and street them, as we used to say in the biz.
You need to rhyme, otherwise it's not a policy.
Right? So the whole idea is that if you track influenza-like illness, you have a much clearer idea of what's going on. And then in that first tweet that he has a lovely picture of how that works. And you could see the influenza-like illness being tracked and how it matches actual influenza season.
Okay.
And it's a very close match. And then COVID came along, and it didn't match influenza season. It was an incredibly large spike. They knew something was going on because all these influenza-like illnesses were showing up, and it wasn't influenza. And so they saw what happened with Alpha and Delta. But after you had the original COVID incredible spread in New York City back in the day.
Yeah.
There was a lot of protection from having already been sick, and so the subsequent spikes weren't anywhere near what it was in March of 2020.
Okay.
And then we got vaccinations, and then Delta Omicron follows. And I say Delta Omicron because right now we still really haven't figured out how much of what we're seeing, like in Connecticut, is Delta. Probably a lot of it. And how much is Omicron? Some of it we don't know.
Yeah.
The public health people in Connecticut figure that within 2 weeks it's all going to be Omicron. But right now we don't know.
It's all ball bearings.
What we do know is, do you show up in the emergency room with influenza-like illness? Do you get admitted to the hospital? Those are the things we can track, and you don't need the super sophisticated which is Delta, which is Omicron, and you don't even need the test. You just need to know what are you showing up with, and that's why it's so valuable. So during prior infections and during prior influenza season, and influenza season is a really nice backdrop for what you used to expect, New York City would have up to 1,000 extra emergency department visits a day.
Okay.
And much of the increase for flu patients would be babies and children because they didn't have prior immunity.
Right.
And despite what your pediatrician told you, a lot of parents don't give their kids flu shots.
Oh. Yeah.
So
all right.
Their share of emergency department visits would increase from about 20% to about 40%. And COVID was completely different. Every day the number of emergency visits was higher. I remember seeing the first break in the relentless increase and barely daring to believe we had reached a peak, and that was March 28th. And on that day, there were 3,000, not 1,000, 3,000 ED visits that day.
Yeah, okay.
And they were all adults. So just a completely different pattern.
Right, yeah.
And the fact that the pattern was different told them something is going on here.
Yes. Different time, different crowd, different numbers.
Okay, and then during the summer lull and the early fall Delta wave, you could literally see the proportion of elderly among the respiratory ED group shrinking as vaccines did their magic. So typically in flu season, the people who show up in the emergency room are the kids and the very old. And then during the first big wave of COVID in New York, it was the elderly showing up. Then they got vaccinated and the elderly stopped showing up.
Mm-hmm. Not because they were dead, because they were alive and well.
Which brings us to December.
Okay.
And he says, I think we have three separate things going on. Influenza is rising, so there's going to be more influenza-like illness in the emergency room.
All right. Sure.
Delta is continuing, and Omicron is kicking in.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing a shift in ED visits toward the elderly, which strongly suggests, gives him great hope that the vaccines are holding.
Okay.
And that's good news.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
there's undoubtedly been a bump up in respiratory emergency department visits in New York City. And remember, we have the O signature there. The number of cases of Omicron, the number of cases of COVID are spiking in New York.
Yeah.
But they're only getting 500 extra visits a day, whereas in a typical flu season, they'll get 1,000. That doesn't sound all that serious.
Okay.
So that suggests that
no
even
more
though the
strain
number
to
of
begin
cases is rising, the number of hospital cases, not so much.
Yeah. I mean,
good news, right?
It is.
It doesn't prove anything, but it's just we're not seeing the hospitals explode, is what I'm saying. And from what I can tell so far, he says the vast majority of these respiratory and influenza-like illness and COVID-like illnesses in the emergency department are not getting admitted.
Okay.
Right? There's a total of 200 pneumonia and influenza admissions. Half of those were COVID positive on December 19th, and that's only 36 cases above seasonal baseline, something that the New York hospitals can easily handle.
Yeah. Maybe
so
not
they're
so
not
much
getting
elsewhere.
overwhelmed.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, there's reports from elsewhere, although they may still
Elsewhere
be
is
dealing
different.
with
You know, Cleveland,
Delta.
for example, is getting slammed by Delta. Now they have Omicron on top of it, maybe. And places like New Hampshire and upstate New York, which we were talking about, are already getting slammed by Delta. Different situation, but a lot of these places are unvaccinated.
Yeah.
New York City is incredible in terms of how aggressive they were about trying to handle things like, vaccine mandates for eating in restaurants and such, and also getting people vaccinated. They were, not bad about it.
Okay.
So it matters. They have their indoor mask requirements. It all matters. adding the non-pharmaceutical interventions to the vaccines gives you much better protection. That's what New York City is very good at. And in some ways, they're leading the country about, how to approach this.
Well, it's good to know because, of course, because they're so populous, they still end up sitting at the top of the lists for the most cases going on, which makes it
so
look
if they have the
like
most
it's
cases,
terrible.
but they don't, they're not going nuts with hospitalization, that is a very, very good thing. So
Good
I have this
background.
wonderful tweet thread about New York City I thought I would share with
New York
you
City.
from a woman named
City
Chelsea Watson.
Never sleeps. Yeah.
Yeah. City
The
that
whole
never
thing.
sleeps. As Omicron surges and our
would like
systems
to sleep.
strain, I wanted to share my COVID-19 experience in New York City last month. It was actually a hopeful window into what a society where we look out for one another and a government that is set up to truly care for us could look like. I'm giving you a data
interesting.
point. I'm not making a prediction. That's what's going to happen.
Although I just want to point out that, for the rest of the country that has always believed that they live where they live because it's a small town America, and unlike the big city, we all care about one another here, except when it comes to masking or taking the vaccine. But in New York City,
City's
where
a
they
series
hate
of small
everybody.
neighborhoods, so
Yeah.
it's actually neighborhood life. But that's
Okay.
a different story.
We're all the
My
same.
symptoms, she said, started with a slight dry cough on a Monday. On Tuesday, I woke up sick and got tested. I was double vaxxed, but not boosted. By Wednesday, I found out I was positive.
Okay.
So
Are you
slight
positive?
symptoms on Monday, Tuesday feeling sick, Wednesday morning,
Positive. Test and
I
positive.
found out I was positive. Within a few hours, I get a call from the New York City Health System Test and Trace Corps.
Ring, ring. Hello.
My contact tracer was helpful and kind. My partner got a tracing call within the hour. Instead of putting the responsibility on the sick individual to trace their steps, the Corps took a community-level approach to stopping the spread by making the calls for me. And then they shared the free resources available to me.
Woo.
A home isolation take care package. Get
What-
this if you can get it.
Okay.
Grocery or medicine
Cookies
delivered.
or
A
anything?
free 10-day hotel stay, including 3 meals a day and transportation.
What? Wow.
I said no, but I should have said yes, she said.
Really?
Help. Yeah, New York is offering isolation in a hotel for free
Oh, my
if you
gosh.
test positive and you need to stay away from, let's say, vulnerable family members.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
They don't
it's the
publicize it, but they
hotel.
do it.
Sure.
Help with domestic violence,
Trump
threat of
hotel.
eviction, and other social services. 10 paid days off from your employer.
Wow. Go.
New York
go
City
to
is
the hotel.
offering that. Medical telehealth appointments or mental health support. Pet care. They will walk your dog.
That's amazing.
Support for paying your utilities and more.
Gosh, let's do it.
When I got the Take Care package with mask, sanitizer, Clorox wipes, thermometer, an oximeter, and a cute little booklet on how to navigate COVID,
Don't eat the Clorox wipes.
right? That's how you monitor your progress here.
Okay.
The program not only tended to my medical and physical needs, also material and social needs in order to not spread the virus. One needs to have a safe place to isolate so not be forced to work or leave their space for any reason. The Test and Trace Corps required me to either answer a call or text every day for 10 days. Every day, they asked about my symptoms. Similar to what happens when you get the vaccine and the CDC contacts you if you agree, and you tell them every day how you feel.
Yeah.
On day 5,
being in
I
Hong
took a turn
Kong.
for the worse. I was weak, sick, and scared. I was a weekend, so I couldn't reach my primary care physician, PCP.
Oh,
I called the
PCP.
public urgent care number in my booklet, courtesy of the care package. I spoke to a doctor in 5 minutes. Because of the severity of my case and my underlying medical condition, they referred me to the monoclonal antibody treatment for free.
Oh,
If you're, and this is all because of this is how they organized it for if you turned positive. If you are in an at-risk group, the state of New York will pay for you to get the treatment, regardless of insurance or immigration status.
Is that the monoclonal antibodies? Okay.
Yeah, the ones that don't work for Omicron anymore.
Yeah,
but,
well, that's true. But
that's
this
a
was
different
while
story.
ago.
I
Trump said
had
the
some
Army was gonna
ambivalent
give it
feelings
to you.
about accepting the treatment, but my community lovingly knocked some sense into me, and I soon had an appointment scheduled. On day 8, I received the treatment at a nearby public hospital. I like the doctor I have through my private insurance, but it took 3 days to get an appointment. They didn't make any plans to support me beyond my physical symptoms. No 10-day plan, no material support. Just take Tylenol, call us if you need us.
Okay.
Take 2
It's not
aspirin
an
and call
ad
me in
for
the morning,
Tylenol.
except don't take aspirin unless you're a male and we're worried about your heart, and even then don't do it. The New York City Health System Test and Trace Corps cared for me like a full human being. They took a long-term approach to tending to my needs, have clearly baked society-level solutions into every step of the process, and the benefits of the program go far beyond just that they're free. The whole approach is rooted in an understanding of how our communities, workplaces, social and material conditions are all deeply connected to our personal well-being. Programs like these can and do exist. They're repeatedly blocked throughout history by a handful of politicians who spread lies and fuel divisions, blaming black and brown people and new Americans for the problems that the 1% created so they can make a health product for sale. These same folks want to distract us from coming together across race and class. I don't know how much my experience will hold now that Omicron is surging. Our public workers, health worker systems are straining. I know things are scary again. It's hard to see the light. But my experience with this small and mighty program filled me with hope. So if you have COVID, answer the call. If the test and trace call you. If you need help, call them, and they'll provide you the care and resources you need to get well. And that was the tweet storm. And a reminder, New York City does a lot of things right. And people who don't live there say, why would you live in such a place? Well, here's one reason.
Yeah, well, free hotel, for one thing. As you were listing off all of these great benefits and then listening to her say that she didn't take them, but she changed her mind, it flashed there for a second, like just a little bit of the same, same base motivation, perhaps, that's moving some people with decisions we don't like. Like, here's free help for things. No. Oh, well, now that I think about it, yes. Here's a free vaccine. It'll prevent you from getting sick. No. Well, now that I think about it, yes. It takes people a while to, I don't know, there's some weird psychological barrier to taking free help from people, for some people anyway. I don't know. But how interesting. I didn't realize how robust the response was in New York City.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was such an interesting thread.
Off and go to a hotel,
so, the bottom line is New York has a lot of programs in place. They're doing their best to really enforce non-pharmaceutical intervention in addition to the vaccines, which is why, and believe me, he's not my favorite person. When Bill de Blasio got on TV and said to Biden, Mr. President, you need to send tests to everybody. We need help. He wasn't coming from, I'm not doing anything. You have to do everything.
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. Speaking of which, yes, big news that I forgot to mention yesterday is the big reversal over at the White House, realizing that that's not a dumb thing, sending everybody free tests. No one really knows why Jen Psaki, glitched out on that one. But in prior administrations, you would have seen them dig in their heels and say, no, we're still not sending tests.
I saw Psaki say it was semi-snarky. Yeah. But it wasn't the worst thing in the world.
It wasn't a great idea.
And every single reporter did here's what she said then, here's what she said now.
Yeah.
And, my point was that, look, what they're saying is accurate. She was snarky, and that was not really the greatest thing in the world. But which is freaking more important, right? Are you going to talk about what she said for the next week? Yes. Are you going to talk about the goddamn policy for 5 minutes? And only in respect to what she said before.
Yeah. My takeaway from it
really
was,
got me annoyed.
My takeaway from it was...
I don't care how petty.
The previous...
We're in the middle of a freaking pandemic. Talk about the policy, and if you're going to ding the White House, ding them for not saying this is an airborne disease and we're also sending you masks.
Oh, well, you should do that too. And you should, because...
That's way more important.
You dinged them for the tests, and then they changed their mind on the tests.
You didn't even mention
again
the
for masks. Well, yeah, they should now. We should now
All you
ding
said
them
is
for
Jen
the masks
Psaki was mean to us, so
that.
we're going to, make sure that you never forget it, because that's what we care about.
Okay, that's
It's high
true.
school.
Yeah. In the meantime, like I was saying, my takeaway from it was, at least there's normal people in the White House who say, oh, well, that wasn't great. We have a chance to reverse that. We could just do what they were asking. Is it the right thing to do? It is. All right, let's do it. We were wrong. Do the right thing instead. The last administration, if Trump's still there, they would there would now be press conferences about how testing is actually making people sick, like they did the first time. Testing is causing the cases. They'll say tests themselves will make you sick. They're terrible.
Whatever you have to say about Jen Psaki, let me contrast it with what Deborah Birx did.
Okay.
I mean, we know what Deborah Birx did. We know what Psaki did. You're talking about Psaki. You're not talking about Deborah Birx. Shut up.
Well, all right. I was going to talk about the other, compare it directly to...
That's me to the press. I mean, focus on what's important. We're in the middle of a pandemic with people worried about Omicron, and the holidays are coming.
Yes.
Focus, right? You grab the 4-year-old, and you have your two hands around her chin, and you look her in the eye, and you say, focus.
Yes. Doesn't always work with the 4-year-olds, but it gets their attention.
It makes you feel better.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think we're past the now. They felt like they had to point that out, but to me, my takeaway was I can't believe we have an administration that will say normal things again. Like,
well, no, they're changing course when they make a mistake. In fact, they're now talking about maybe they should continue the don't have to pay your student loan right now until this is under a little bit better control.
Yeah. In other words, they're responding to pressure and responding in the right way, whereas the other
that's
guys
fine. That's what we call normal.
Yeah, good. Hooray for normal. That's
right. Hooray for normal. We shouldn't need to comment on normal.
Okay, that's true. But yeah, I guess we were shocked. We had a bad period in there somewhere about
the House and Senate passed a law. Oh my God, you're kidding.
They're having.
They did. In fact, more people voted for it than voted against it, so it actually passed. Really? Yeah, we're going to write like 5 different stories about it for 4 days because it's just so unusual.
Bills are going to conference. Laws are being made. People are complying with regulations. What? Wow. Well, good. I'm glad it's happening.
When we elected Biden, we elected him to bring normal back. This is what we mean by normal.
Yeah. Something went wrong? All right, let's fix it.
Yeah, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make errors. You're in your 70s. You have a worldview that perhaps not everybody agrees with, especially if you're 25 or 30. You still don't have it together on climate, but at least you're trying the right things and you're doing the right things.
Yeah,
that's good.
And people who are telling you when you're wrong are being heard. That's a great thing.
Well, they're not being, hounded and
that's for sure.
Physically threatened.
Oh yeah, right.
And a whole bunch of other stuff that used to happen.
That's a whole different level. Right. You could actually, petition for redress of grievances and get it, as opposed to being arrested. How dare you petition the government?
Right. And, I have a very harsh view of how the inside the Beltway people cover the White House. For example, I think Sarah Sanders is more highly regarded in their circles than Psaki is.
That's crazy.
Because Psaki gives it back to them.
Really? Oh, my gosh.
Sarah Sanders, just makes fun of everybody else but the reporters. And so they love it because, I
guess. Yeah.
They're more than happy to fade her and give her all sorts of presents when even though she lied to their face every single day and they all know it. But she did it nicely.
How do they feel about the last one? I've already forgotten the last.
Psaki, she's sarcastic sometimes.
Yeah.
Well,
that's true.
You deserve it, especially if you're Fox News.
Yeah. Sometimes I guess she gets stuck in that mode every once in a while.
Right, which is bad. She should fix that. No question about it. But, she's been a lot more effective in my point of view than Sanders was.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I see a lot of praise from her, but that's from outside of the press corps, I guess.
No, that's my point.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not certain that but I don't see anything them still talking about Sarah Sanders for some reason. But good. I'm glad I'm missing it. Let you pick it up. It would make me sick. So I'll leave that task to you. But I guess now that she's running for governor in Arkansas, and I don't know. I hope it keeps her.
Yeah, she is. She'll probably win.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We have terrible people in this country, and they run for office fairly frequently. Okay, well, I wonder if she could get into that restaurant that threw her out now.
I don't know.
She should try, but she can't leave the state. She has to campaign. So good. She's stuck there in Arkansas. Let her stay there. You can do a lot of harm by governing Arkansas incorrectly, but I don't live there, so I don't know. I guess we wait and see what the consequences are for folks there. Okay, well, that brings us pretty close to the top of the hour again. So
right, our friend and friend of the show, Stephen Andrew, Darkside, says hopeful, but I don't know if New York City will hold up as a leading indicator. Lots of both backs and hard-won resistance in the New England area, which is true. We're in the same situation as New York in that regard. So that doesn't mean that, let's say, Cleveland or upstate New York will do as well. But my point back to him is there are places that aren't doing so well. But good news is good news. It's not a prediction.
True. Right. You're just reading the stats to us. Okay.
Right. Right? You assume that because I say that, I must be saying that it's a leading indicator for everywhere else. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we don't have information from a lot of places. Places like South Africa and New York collect information, and therefore we have it to share. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the same everywhere. But, again, don't ban travel from South Africa because they collect the data and tell us about it.
Yes. Did we? I mean, I assume we reversed that, and my big
I don't
assumption
know.
was, that's the thing. I haven't really heard anything about it, and I don't know whether that's
I
they
don't know that it has
quietly
been
did the
reversed.
right thing and the newspapers don't care, or
I don't think it's been reversed yet.
Well, that seems pretty weird. That's something, I guess, if we had the energy and the bandwidth, we could press them to reverse that, just like they did with the testing, but it feels like that's not my job.
Yeah. I mean, I think they need to acknowledge that this is an airborne thing, and I think they need to up their game on masks.
That has to happen. And the masking thing too. It really would make a statement if they did mail people masks that were better. I mean, you'd
Use them for
run into trouble.
Halloween. If you're not going to use it, that's up to you. We can't make you do stuff. But there's no reason why we can't give you one.
That's true. Although I wonder whether they're going to do it like on the same basis that they might do the tests. I understand that's a thing where you have to. It's not going to just plain mail
Show up
them
in
to
your
everybody.
mailbox like a tax
you got to request
return. You
them.
got to go on the website and you got to request it,
Right.
and that's not ready yet.
And I suppose that's a better approach because there will be nuts who burn the things and make TikTok videos of themselves.
Right. But it's a step in the right direction. And then, of course, the follow-up is what happens after you request a test. How often can you do it? Also, information on testing, you can be positive and not test positive on these home tests for a day or two. So that's new information. They're a little slow at picking up the infection. So if you don't feel good and test negative, you're not clear. If you don't feel good and test positive, you have it.
Doesn't mean you're supposed to go out and lick your neighbors or anything. It's just to test yourself again. That's why I guess a lot of these tests come 2 to a box. So that's supposed to
you can test
be
yourself a couple
built-in
of days later. That's
redundancy.
exactly right.
I have ones that come 1 to a box, and that just means open
That
a
means
second
you need
box.
2 boxes.
Yeah. So, it's bad for the environment, I guess, but recycle the boxes, I suppose, is my best advice to you on that. All right, Greg, thanks very much. Are they
Somehow we
collecting
have enough
recycling today?
material, and I'll be back tomorrow. And you know what? We'll probably have enough material then too.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, sorry, Greg. That's why I'm glad you picked up the signal on that one. We forget that this is a 1-minute break at the top, and he likes to leave during the break so that there's no weird sounds, but then we get into chatting, and then all of a sudden at the end of the chat, David stops answering. And then he realizes, I hear the music is coming around to he has to come back. And if he's talking, then he has to edit himself out later, so... Okay, well, at any rate, I was telling Greg the good news I am reminded of by seeing it retweeted now that I'm checking Twitter this morning, and reminded that I forgot to read Bill's morning tweet. It's still morning, and it still comes from Bill, and we can read all of that. And then I have good news to bring you about YouTube, which is a place I don't have a whole lot of good news to report on usually, but here's the... shall we start with Bill's morning tweet? That came first. Gee whiz. An hour ago, the Kagro in the Morning radio show was live. It still is, so that's good. It's still valid. Kagro X, it says here, just won the biggest legal battle against YouTube in the history of the country. Many people are saying it was the most massive and most beautiful victory ever, including D-Day. And I like that. That's true. That brings us around to the good news, which is, you may recall that on the show that aired on Thanksgiving Day, it was not a live show, but I pre-recorded it. I read a most excellent article from Talia Levin, who had written, a great piece about just how it kicked off with just how dumb it was for anti-vaxxers to be marching around with yellow stars on as though the vaccine mandates were the equivalent of the Holocaust. You remember all of that. And it examined the conspiracy theory mindset rather closely. And, of course, repeated some of the dumb things that conspiracy theorists, when it comes to this particular theory, tell themselves about the vaccine and other things. And the YouTube algorithm that checks things for medical misinformation. I mean, I guess at bottom we should be glad that there is such a thing. And given how many people have access to, YouTube and can put up a video on any given day, like how many people really would you need in order to actually listen and give a human brain give time on a human brain, like a mainframe computer, time on a human brain to listening to these podcasts to make the determination whether this is really medical misinformation or just references to it. And I imagine you just probably couldn't get to everything. And then, of course, they have the appeals process. And I don't know what happens during the appeals process, but I gather that it's basically nothing. So they said, you can appeal our decision. So I appeal the decision. And that's the point at which I would think maybe there you put some human ears on the thing. But they must just, I assume that every takedown is appealed as well because it's costless to appeal. And I don't know what ended up happening exactly. Like, did they say, all right, well, we're not taking down his show every day here. Maybe we should take a second look at what's going on. I don't know. At any rate, they kept looking into it. And I don't know whether it was because that's part of their process or whether it was because I was on Twitter complaining and tagging them with it. But I got an answer back this morning from Team YouTube, which I don't know what it is exactly, but it's one of those blue checkmark accounts. And I guess, they're YouTube customer relations or something like that. So anyway, I got this message. Thanks for your patience. I didn't really feel like I had very much patience, but, it's a standard thing to say. Thanks for your patience while we looked into this. Confirmed this was a mistake during the review process, and your channel is back up now. The whole channel was never down, of course, but whatever, that's fine. Any actions have been reversed. That's good news. And any penalty been removed. Reach back out if you need further assistance. So, all right, I guess I'll do that. Finch Haven, our friend on Twitter here, says, by the way, his comment on it is, this is what happens when your quote-unquote review process is offshored to a call center in Pakistan that's working off bullet lists that are nothing more than PowerPoint decks written entirely in English. Which, okay, maybe that's what's happening. But, I mean, I guess it took them long enough. But luckily for me, it doesn't make a great deal of difference. Not only was the show ordinarily was available to everybody else on every other platform, I don't know how many people are finding it exclusively on YouTube, but I know that's where a lot of people land because it's easy and familiar. But, there were other sources where you could still download the thing. I should go and take a look now and scroll back at the YouTube page and see that the Thursday, November 25th is what we're looking for. Is it back in place, and is it in chronological order as it's supposed to be? I don't know. What doesn't let me? Is it hard? Seems like it's not all that easy to scroll back to it. I don't want to play them, but let's see. Maybe there's another place where I can scroll. Oh, here we go. This will let me go further back. Yep, there it is. November 25th, 2021, right in line where it's supposed to be. So that is good news. Thanks to YouTube for coming around and triple checking on it if they ever double checked it. That I can't be sure about. I don't know what the process is. And I should give them more credit. I mean, the first time this happened, they reversed themselves, though, on the initial appeal. So I had higher hopes for their being able to do it correctly the second time. And in my view, they did not. But I thought that might be the end of the process, and I was just willing to let the whole thing go because what do I care? I don't make any money, so I wasn't losing any money from this one episode being gone. It was just annoying because, they were wrong and I was right and I wanted them to change it. And then they went and did it after I had given up hope on it anyway. So there you go. That's something you can, I don't know what. take with you for the rest of your life. You can feel good about YouTube, which I know was a serious hole in your life up until now. All right. Let's see. What else do we want to keep up to date on? There are a couple other things. Let's see what's in Pocket for today. Yes, right. 1, 2, 3 things. Some things I saw yesterday that I didn't get a chance to point out, but this David Day and one that reminded me that I think we might have said, although now I'm wondering whether I said it to Greg off the air during one of the breaks. He had an interesting thought about the idea of sending test kits to everyone. We mentioned, I think, yes, we did get it on the air, that the mechanism is such that you have to eventually, once they set it up, request free tests in the mail, and then they will send them to you. And I think they're prioritizing people who don't have private insurance and therefore won't be able to take advantage of the program that's set to kick in next month that will reimburse you through insurance for tests so that they eventually come out to be free, even though you have to lay out some cash up front probably. But David Dayan was just tweeting sarcastically the other day, the COVID test burning parties in Georgia or wherever are going to be lit. No pun intended there, I don't think, but it came out that way. Anyway, that might be the case, but people will have to go through the trouble of requesting those tests in order to then burn them. But, they've done stranger things. They've burned their Nike shoes, smashed their Keurig machines, what have you. By the way, do you remember? I can't recall exactly what their gripe was. I think Keurig maybe pulled their advertising from one of the terrible right-wing TV shows or something. So all the right-wingers were going to smash their Keurigs on video and then circulate those videos on social media. I spotted the other day, I guess Marjorie Trader Green circulating one of her dumb home videos and spotted the Keurig machine on the counter behind her. So I guess she's not really a dedicated enough Republican to go ahead and smash that. Anyway, it's possible that there will be test burning parties or mask burning parties. We've seen the mask burnings in the past, but if it comes from this administration and comes in the mail, then people will be probably tempted to do something dumb like that and burn it. And so anyway, maybe the request system means we'll get a little closer to the, hey, if you don't want it, more for us sort of situation. We'll see. Let's see, other things in Pocket. What else did I save for today from yesterday? Oh, yeah. So on the Joe Manchin front, there's probably, this is probably now out there in article form, but I happened to notice yesterday Scott Wong, actually 2 days ago, Scott Wong, senior staff writer at The Hill, covering the House leadership, as he describes himself in his Twitter bio, tweeting about the dynamic now between Joe Manchin and Pramila Jayapal, the leader of the House Progressive Caucus. And I guess things were deteriorating as between them. Of course, you'll recall that for a long time, the House Progressive Caucus had as its position that they would only agree to pass the infrastructure bill if the Senate did its part and passed the bill they wanted, which was the original version, the original revised version, and certainly the House-passed version of the Build Back Better Act. I mean, it's gone through 18 versions, and the version that was sent over eventually to the Senate was, of course, trimmed tremendously in order to make it possible for the Senate to even consider passing it, because you have Joe Manchin hanging out there saying no, no, no to everything. They cut everything that they could, I guess, out of it in an attempt to allow him to hold up his end of the bargain, and then he just didn't. And, so a lot of people reflecting on this over the past couple of days that, they were right, and anyone who believed them was right, that you're going to have to put your foot down, and yes, holding the infrastructure bill up for a while to make the point that we don't trust, essentially, Joe Manchin to do his job in all of this and to join in with the rest of the Democrats and pass Build Back Better. But ultimately, we do also realize, well, having the infrastructure bill is better than having nothing. So, all right, well, we'll go out on a limb. We've made our point, and now we'll be the big people here and say, all right, we'll give something first. And then if Joe Manchin has an ounce of integrity, whoops, then he too will meet us halfway and do the right thing. And then he didn't, and everybody said, well, that's what we were worried about. And he's shown once again that you can never trust the guy. So anyway, Scott Wong, tweeting about the dynamics between the two, says, as of this would be Sunday, I guess, the 20th, Manchin called Jayapal this morning. She says, Manchin went back on his word, and that lack of integrity is stunning, says Jayapal. According to the White House's statement yesterday, and in my own conversations with the White House yesterday, it is abundantly clear that we cannot trust what Senator Manchin says Representative Jayapal. Jayapal calls on Biden to use executive action to tackle pieces of the Build Back Better bill. We can no longer wait on one man to do what the country needs. We now call on the president to keep his commitment to us that we would build back better. I don't know how much of it can be done by executive action, but it's an open question. Jayapal says she does not regret allowing bipartisan infrastructure bill to move forward without first passing BBB. I don't have regrets. What message does it send to voters by failing to pass BBB, immigration reform and voting rights? It's a terrible message, Jayapal concedes. And then last in the series here, maybe his full write-up of it. Progressive leader calls on Biden to unilaterally act on BBB agenda, and attached is his article about that. And I don't know. Let's see if there's any discussion of what she thinks could be enacted by executive action alone. Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal on Monday called on President Biden to use executive action to unilaterally enact pieces of the Democrats' Build Back Better agenda. Just one day after Senator Joe Manchin derailed the party's signature climate and social spending package, no one should think that we're going to be satisfied with an even smaller package that leaves people behind or refuses to tackle critical issues like climate change, Jayapal said on a conference call with reporters. That's why it's now incumbent on President Biden to keep his promise to us and to the American people by using the ultimate tool in his toolbox of executive action in every arena immediately. Well, sounds like a big ask. Jayapal said she would begin conversations with fellow Progressive Caucus leaders later on Monday and with the White House later this week. At this point, we should not wait for that legislative path for the president to take action. I just think if there are too many Americans hurting, there's too much at stake. We have trusted for too long that Senator Manchin was engaging in good faith. I am not willing to hang my hopes and the futures of millions of Americans across the country on whether or not he will do what he said he would do yesterday, which is often different from today or tomorrow. It's unclear what pieces of the roughly $2 trillion Build Back Better package could be enacted unilaterally by Biden and withstand legal challenges. For example, it's unlikely Biden could use his executive powers to extend expanded child tax credits that are set to expire at the end of the month. Still, progressives are pressing Biden to take action and to also make tackling climate change a top priority. Whatever costs the senator claimed to be concerned about, it will cost exponentially more to act later, after the damage has occurred both in dollars and in humans, Jayapal said, referring to Manchin's opposition to the bill's climate provisions. We cannot pass up our singular opportunity to address the scope of the crisis. Asked about Jayapal's push for unilateral action, the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters she wasn't aware of it being under discussion, but noted that Biden hasn't shied from using executive action to make a range of progress. The benefit of legislation is obviously that it makes it permanent. More or less, Psaki said. Jayapal said she gave Manchin a piece of her mind when he called her on Monday morning. She accused the moderate Democratic senator of reneging on a promise with Biden to support Build Back Better. Manchin said no such commitment was made. Manchin went back on his word That lack of integrity is stunning in a town where people say the only thing that you have is your word, Jayapal told reporters. According to the White House's statement yesterday and my own conversations with the White House yesterday, it's abundantly clear that we cannot trust what Senator Manchin says. The senator called me this morning. I took his call, and there's nothing I have said here that I didn't say to him. We cannot hang the futures of millions of Americans on the words of one man who represents a state that has a tiny percentage of the country's entire population. All right, well, no actual answers about what could be enacted by executive action, but rather more questions. In fact, not even more questions. It's the same question that we were asking before. What could you do? And the answer is, I don't know, and there's nothing I can think of offhand, but there's probably small parts of some parts that could be done by executive action. That's true. All right. Let's see. Other things that we ought to bring you up to speed on. Axios reporting yesterday that, to no one's surprise, Republicans plan, if they are able to capture control of the House of Representatives, to make all sorts of terrible mischief and make lots of people's lives miserable. I mean, they were going to do that anyway as a matter of policy, but here they mean members of Congress who are Democrats. They will be making their lives miserable. Here's how. GOP maps Biden probes, prelude to 2024 culture war by Mike Allen, the infamous, whatever the hell, I don't know what his title is over there at Axios, was one of the founding reporters behind the place. So this will be as Axios as anything ever gets. House Republicans have begun mapping aggressive probes of the Biden administration if they win back the majority, including inquiries into the origins of COVID. Not much to find out there in terms of real facts, but if you want to lie, it should be an awesome time for Republicans. A leak of IRS data about billionaires, and accusations that the NSA spied on Tucker Carlson. Very important matters for the country, of course. You don't think so? Well, here's why it matters, according to Axios. The plans, obtained exclusively by Axios, show House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy would make muscular use of majority powers for the last 2 years of President Biden's term if, as expected, the GOP wins the majority in next year's term. So why it matters, of course, is they will, not do any real governing, and they will, what they think of as, take revenge for the investigation into January 6th. I mean, there had to be one, right? So what's to take revenge for? Well, we don't care. Well, you're targeting us. Well, you're the ones that did it. Right. And so we're going to take revenge and say that there are things that we believe you did that we're going to investigate, except those things very often did not happen or didn't happen the way you described them. But since they'll be able to control the investigations, they feel wronged by all these things. They also have plans to strip many Democrats of their committee assignments in retaliation for the 2 or perhaps 3 members of the House that have been stripped of their committee assignments for most egregious breaches of decorum. And they'll just simply claim, no, you're the ones who are breaching decorum, and strip people of committee assignments. What else have they have planned here? McCarthy plans to send a spate of preservation notices to departments throughout Biden's cabinet, ordering them to retain documents that might be needed for future GOP oversight hearings. Their little between-the-lines analysis says Republicans want to deflect attention from the 1-6 Commission. That's a good admission. A real-time probe of real violence, death, and looting in the Capitol. So, I mean, that's actually pretty blunt for Axios to just say, well, the reason they're trying to do it, obviously, is to deflect attention from the investigation into actual violence, death, and looting at the Capitol. But they could also say, but, they feel like they shouldn't as journalists, and that would be bad. Anyway, as a prelude, House Republicans in August sent Biden a request to preserve all records related to your administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan. And, of course, the records are all being preserved because of the Presidential Records Act anyway, so, I guess they can strut around and say, aha, we claim a win. We got them to preserve their records, as they were supposed to by law. Investigations planned by House Republicans in parallel with their legislative agenda. And there's a link to something that I guess they claim will be their legislative agenda. Anyway, these investigations show they hope to use congressional power to stoke culture wars for 2024, because that's what they do. On the IRS front, they want to investigate a leak of a, quote, vast cache of IRS information about billionaires to ProPublica with respect to the NSA. Tucker Carlson last summer accused the spy agency of targeting his show's communications. The NSA said he was never an intelligence target. That might be because he's got no intelligence. Parents. We're going to investigate parents. How about that? Did you know that? Attorney General Merrick Garland's now vow to mobilize the FBI against threats of violence against school board members after the National School Boards Association used the phrase domestic terrorism. The association apologized for its letter, but we're going to have an investigation into that. Why are you doing things about parents who say they want to assassinate school board members? Stop it. That's the investigation they want to conduct. On the border, supposedly record levels of illegal immigration. I mean, they were going to have those hearings, no doubt, regardless. COVID. Their view, of course, is what needs to be investigated is, what about the origins of the virus, and can't we blame China for it? And CDC communications about school closures and mask mandates, which are good things and saved lives. They would like to see them undone, and they will punish the people who saved your kids and your teachers' lives. And Afghanistan, they want to know about decisions behind the withdrawal, even though you should drop it already, and an accounting of Americans who remain stranded because they totally want to do something to help. And lastly, something about JEDI, about which I know nothing. I don't know if it's an acronym or not, JEDI. It is a disputed cloud computing contract. There's a link so you could read about the dispute if you want to. I don't. And we'll move on. And that's a good sampling of the things that they think they'll be investigating. The JEDI thing basically brings us back to like Solyndra territory. Things people never heard of and generally don't care a great deal about, but they're going to run around for the next couple of years saying, what about Solyndra? And, that'll be your cue to say, I don't even know what planet these guys are on. This is code amongst themselves and no one else. What's next? The wrap-up of the article here. McCarthy plans to beef up staff, counsel, and other resources to be ready to extract information beginning day one if the GOP gets the gavel. And I guess we should say if the gavel is handed to McCarthy, because I really do think if Matt Gaetz goes ahead and says he's going to be voting for and then therefore nominates Donald Trump as Speaker of the House, there's going to be a lot of votes for him. I don't know if it's going to make any difference. Or whether it will keep McCarthy from being able to garner a majority of the votes. But, yeah, I mean, ordinarily you rule that out entirely. But, this is Donald Trump. And the guy fighting against it is Kevin McCarthy. He just might not have the wherewithal to put together a real campaign to fend this idea off. He's not very good at things. He's just not. All right, let's see. Here's some other interesting news. Oh, let's grab this one because we're about to go on break. We'll go over to here. Good blogosphere friend Joe My God and his blog of the same name have this interesting piece. Anti-handouts group snorted up. I like that metaphor. Anti-handouts group snorted up COVID relief funds. How do you like this? The Intercept reports, among other things, some excerpts from the Intercept's reporting. Government spending is a huge problem, the conservative video site PragerU tweeted in September 2019. We must reinvest in Americans by giving them a hand up, not handouts, the group wrote in another tweet that November. But last year, Right-wing groups that have long opposed the concept of increased government spending on handouts were the recipients of more than $1.7 million in Paycheck Protection Program loans, while seeing significant increases in contributions or net assets, according to new research from the government watchdog group Accountable. You can read the full article in The Intercept, and you should click through and go grab it so that you have the full context of things. We're now late on our music and have to cut out at odd places, but I wanted to read you those two things without distraction, even though I can handle both. But there you go. That's pretty interesting news. I mean, I guess you figured that was happening somewhere, right? And of course it would be happening among right-wing groups that hate government handouts. I wonder why they were able to get away with that. Well, IRS, check it out. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I probably should have waited another second or two to come in at a better time from the editing point of view later on, but okay, you get what you get. And it was time for us to restart. I wanted to jump over to the Intercept version of the article rather than just the excerpts that Joe, my God, had shared with us, just to give a full readout to it. And it's not a very long article, but there's some interesting additional notes in here. And Akela Lacey is the writer of this piece for The Intercept, a December 21st piece. Right-wing groups opposed to government aid cashed in while collecting PPP loans. Prager University Foundation, the Ayn Rand Institute as well, and the Americans for Tax Reform saw gains while on government aid in 2020, according to new research. So once again, it was meant to be easy to get and easy to have forgiven. And I guess when that was the design of the program, and we knew that there would be some borderline fraud or even outright fraud associated with it. I have seen a couple of articles about people who just claimed to have, enormous companies and claimed a bunch of payroll protection program funds and just really had no company at all. There was a story just the other day. I guess I could go and grab it just, by way of proving that it actually happened. I happened to see on Twitter, the story was like this wild headline of a former Olympic speed skater, I guess, who, in retirement had started a company, or claimed to have started a company anyway, and the long story short here was that they claimed to be the head of a 400 employee company, and in fact had no employees whatsoever, and took a $10 million Paycheck Protection Program loan and had it forgiven and pocketed the $10 million. And the idea, somehow, for whatever reason, being that she would use the $10 million, by the way, to finance the production of a movie starring Elijah Wood. I don't really know, why this would happen or what the connection was supposed to be, but at any rate, A former Olympic speed skater did in fact do that, just basically said, yeah, I have a 400-person company. Okay, I have no company, and I want to keep the $10 million and invest it in the movie. It happened. It's out there. I don't really care that much about it. It's kind of a wild story, maybe a Friday kind of a thing, but acknowledging that it happened. But more to the point, there are people who are sort of actively all about opposing government handouts or what they call handouts and waste, who upon seeing, I guess that's why, just like everything else, it's projection. Well, those people will just, defraud the government and spend their money on drugs and whatnot. And instead, I will defraud the government and spend the money on either drugs or drugs that people don't think of as drugs, or just keep the money myself, and somehow that's better. Well, let's see. The relatively short article from Michaela Lacey here begins this way. Government spending is a huge problem. You heard this paragraph before when Joe My God quoted it. Government spending is a huge problem, the conservative video site PragerU, that's Prager University, tweeted in September of 2019, we must reinvest in Americans by giving them a hand up, not handouts. The group wrote in another tweet that November with a video of then Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Ben Carson discussing rehabilitation for incarcerated people, titled Americans Need a Hand Up, Not Handouts. But last year, right-wing groups that have long opposed the concept of increased government spending on quote-unquote handouts were the recipients of more than $1.7 million in Paycheck Protection Program loans, while seeing significant increases in contributions or net assets, according to the research from the government agency watchdog group Accountable.us. So, on top of it all, they were actually doing okay. They are donation funded, or at least underwritten in part by donations, and the donations were coming in just the same, and there was really no reason for them to call upon the program other than that it was free money. Last April, the Small Business Administration launched the $349 billion emergency loan program to help small businesses struggling at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. PPP loans to Prager University Foundation, the Ayn Rand Institute, and the Americans for Tax Reform Foundation were all made public last summer, but recently released 990 forms for 2020 show that each group saw significant increases in contributions or net revenue at the same time that they received hundreds of thousands of dollars in government subsidies. Right-wing groups that wave their finger at federal relief spending for local governments and working families never seem to mind when it benefits them. Kyle Herrig, president of Accountable.us, said in a statement, the same people who've made careers out of bashing government programs were among the first in line for taxpayer-funded assistance during the COVID-19 crisis, aid intended for struggling mom-and-pop businesses. Their hypocrisy is trumped only by their shamelessness. If these groups were serious about their own purported principles, they'd return the money to the taxpayers. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, not long before Prager University Foundation received a PPP loan, Dennis Prager was already at work downplaying the severity of the virus. Videos posted throughout the pandemic by the conservative video site PragerU, which Prager co-founded in 2011, alleged that there was an, quote, orchestrated attack against experimental use of hydroxychloroquine, and that the death toll from COVID-19 had been inflated. The group's YouTube page has 2.9 million subscribers, and it says its videos were viewed more than 1 billion times in 2019, whereas mine got taken down because I read a story about how dumb their medical misinformation is. They have been able to get 2.9 million subscribers and monetize making those dumb conspiracy theories up and making videos about them, and YouTube has no problem with them, I guess. Prager University Foundation, which hosts PragerU, received more than $704,000 in PPP loans the same year that it saw a 55%, $12.3 million increase in contributions from 2019, and a $15 million increase in net worth over the same period. The nonprofit group, founded in 2009, has long criticized the concept of government spending and, quote, handouts. In October, PragerU published a video titled The Bankrupting of America, which criticized former President Donald Trump's approval of a massive increase in government spending during the pandemic, as well as additional spending by President Joe Biden. The Ayn Rand Institute received more than $713,000 in PPP loans last spring. The group's mission is to create a culture whose guiding principles are reason, rational self-interest, individualism, and laissez-faire capitalism, a culture in which individuals are free to pursue their own happiness with stolen government money, I guess. Last May, ARI posted a blog explaining why it was okay to accept government aid despite Rand's well-known position against such programs. The CARES Act has created a moral dilemma for those Americans who value freedom, they wrote. The pandemic has cost them their jobs, their savings, their business, and they blame a significant part of this loss on the government. But because they oppose government handouts, they worry that accepting CARES money would be a breach of integrity. No, it would. At the Ayn Rand Institute, we are dedicated to philosophic principle. And because we will take any relief money offered us. We will take it unapologetically because the principle here is justice. Or rather, gimmitarianism. Give me what I want and take it away from other people if you need to fund it that way. I don't care whether they get money so much as long as I get it. And I do, though, vocally oppose their getting the money because I think that might mean less for me later. Anyway, ARI reported $7.6 million in contributions last year, a 19% increase from 2019. The group reported $1.2 million in gains last year, up from losses of $790,000 in 2019, which would have had nothing to do with COVID. Americans for Tax Reform Foundation, the nonprofit wing of Americans for Tax Reform, received more than $290,000 in PPP relief last spring. The group said the loan helped the company avoid layoffs, writing that it is a legally and financially separate research and educational 501c3 that was badly hurt by the government shutdown. ATRF's net assets increased last year by 36%, or $4.6 million, cutting its 2009 deficit of $17.5 million and $12.9 million, from $17.5 to $12.9. Americans for Tax Reform and its foundation were founded in 1985 by Grover Norquist at former President Ronald Reagan's request to oppose all tax increases. Despite its stated aims, billions of dollars in Paycheck Protection Program loans went to wealthy business owners and not the mom-and-pop shops they were designed to support. Several such small businesses were denied outright or received less money than they asked for. The PPP program was also accused of shutting out black small business owners. Just by way of background, so you know what's going on. Okay, thought I would bring you up to speed on that one. How about this one? We, I think, read a little bit about that weird situation in which somehow, for some reason, and we don't really know why exactly, Kanye West's publicist, or one of several publicists, ended up getting involved in the election conspiracy theories and big lie and went to visit the Georgia poll worker about whom rumors were already in circulation and about whom, or the rumors were then passed on by Donald Trump himself during the Brad Raffensperger call. It had already reached him, and he was making his case to reverse the course of the election based on the stupid and untrue rumors that he had heard about these individual poll workers in Georgia. And at any rate, so at some point, Kanye West's publicist ends up going down there and cornering her and visiting her, and they go to a police station because this woman feels uncomfortable. She wants to have the conversation with this publicist in a neutral setting with the police around. And anyway, you remember that story, and they remember that there's some reference to this publicist woman tells the Georgia poll worker, I want you to speak to Harrison Ford about this. And it wasn't, the famous Harrison Ford, but he was some political operative instead? Well, okay. So Reuters, which was part of the original crew reporting this weird news, have this follow-up. Linda So and Jason Zepp, S-Z-E-P, have this piece for Reuters. Special report, Trump aide setup meeting. It was a Trump aide that set up this meeting where the election worker was pressured. And who was this Trump aide? Well, now we find out that, well, this is the person that Kanye West's publicist accidentally, or whatever, misidentified, I guess we can say, as Harrison Ford. It's got a similar name, but it's not Harrison Ford. It's Harrison Floyd. It's really like sort of a weird substitution to make, but okay, your brain would want to go to Harrison Ford, of course. Well, who is Harrison Floyd? I don't know. Let's find out what Reuters has. The summary has 3 bullet points. Harrison Floyd, executive director of Black Voices for Trump, says he recruited publicist Trevian Kutti, K-U-T-T-I, to meet with Georgia election worker. Garrison Douglas, Georgia staffer for Black Voices for Trump and current employee of the RNC, says he attended the meeting with this election worker. And the revelation ties senior Trump campaign figure to the effort to get the election worker to confess to bogus fraud charges. So not only was Trump accusing her on the phone call with Raffensperger, but a Trump campaign worker was setting up this weird series of meetings and pressure tactics to try to coerce a false confession out of this person. So what do we have here? A member of Donald Trump's 2020 presidential campaign arranged and participated in a meeting at which a Georgia election worker says she was pressed by a Chicago publicist to falsely admit voting fraud. The revelation directly ties a senior figure in the former president's political operation to an extraordinary late-night January 4th meeting in which a $16 an hour election worker faced pressure to implicate herself in a baseless conspiracy theory stoked by Trump himself as he sought to overturn his Georgia election loss. Harrison Floyd, who was the executive director of a national campaign coalition called Black Voices for Trump in 2020, told Reuters on Monday that he asked Chicago publicist Trevian Kutti to visit the Atlanta area to speak with 62-year-old temporary election worker Ruby Freeman. Floyd said he then participated by phone in a meeting Kutti held with Freeman at a police station in Georgia's Cobb County. Kutti was accompanied at the meeting by another Trump campaign figure, Garrison Douglas, who was a Georgia leader in Black Voices for Trump during the campaign and now works as a Republican Party spokesperson in the state. Douglas confirmed to Reuters that he was present at the meeting. Floyd said he recruited Douglas and Kutti because he was unable to attend himself. In a statement to Reuters on Monday, Douglas said, "On January 4th, I was unemployed and received a call to serve as a volunteer driver, as I had many times in the past. I had no involvement in the meeting beyond the task of driving." In a phone interview Monday, Floyd said he was asked if he'd be willing to set up the meeting by a man he described as a chaplain with, quote, connections in federal law enforcement. He declined to name the clergyman or to detail what those connections involved. Floyd said the chaplain, who's white, wanted him to approach Freeman, who is black, to discuss an immunity deal for her out of a belief that she would not trust a white stranger. Floyd, Douglas, and Kutti are all black. And guess what? She didn't trust them either. Floyd said that he had left his role in the Trump campaign before the January 4th meeting. Trump himself never asked me to go to Georgia, he said, and board members of the Black Voices for Trump group had no involvement in this. Floyd said he arranged the meeting in an effort to help Freeman. He said he himself believed she was seeking assistance, including immunity from prosecution, over claims from the Trump camp that she had committed voting fraud. Freeman, through a spokesperson, said she never reached out to anyone to seek immunity. Her lawyer, Von Dubose, declined to comment further. A former Justice Department official in Georgia confirmed that state and federal investigators concluded in December of 2020 that there was no evidence Freeman committed fraud. As a result, the department never considered offering her immunity, said the official, who had direct knowledge of a Federal Bureau of Investigation inquiry into Trump's Georgia election fraud claims. Floyd did not directly answer when asked whether Freeman requested immunity at the meeting. He said Freeman wasn't willing to put anything down on paper, so he had nothing to run up the flagpole, referring to his more senior contacts in Trump's political operation, which he says he had left. Interestingly, he tries to duck responsibility for the Trump campaign by saying, I had already left the Trump campaign by January 4th, but everything I did at this meeting, I checked with Trump campaign officials. So I don't know how effective the separation was. Asked if he told Freeman that he was a Trump campaign official, Floyd said, I'm pretty certain that I made it clear. Clear that what? I don't know. That's the end of the statement. He referred to a comment by Cuddy captured on police body cam video telling Freeman that, quote, federal people were involved in offering her help. And, of course, even when he was employed by the Trump campaign, he was not a federal person. So that was a mistake to begin with. Who was the current president at that time? President Trump, says Floyd. If she's there saying, I'm here to connect you with federal people, well, that's people in the Trump administration. Right, but not people in the Trump campaign. Freeman told Reuters in a previous interview that she did not know Cuddy was a Trump supporter until after the meeting at the police station when Freeman researched the publicist online. Cuddy and her lawyer, Robert Barker, did not respond to requests for comment. In an Instagram post last Monday, Cuddy denied pressuring Freeman to falsely admit fraud. A spokesperson for Trump did not respond to requests for comment for this story. RNC, where Douglas is now employed, did not respond to a request for comment. The involvement of Trump campaign figures in the meeting with Freeman highlights the aggressive and unusual steps taken by backers of the former president to help reverse his loss in the once reliably Republican state. Beginning on December 3rd last year, Trump and his allies falsely claimed that video of vote counting at Atlanta's State Farm Arena proved that Freeman and her daughter, Wandrea Shea Moss, another Fulton County election worker, committed election fraud. They alleged the mother and daughter illegally tabulated mysterious ballots from a suitcase multiple times to create 18,000 fraudulent votes, enough to cause Trump to lose the Georgia election. State and county officials quickly disproved that allegation. The false claims sparked months of death threats and other harassment by Trump supporters toward Freeman and her daughter. The district attorney in Fulton County, where Freeman worked on the ballot count, is conducting a criminal investigation into Trump's alleged interference in Georgia's election. The district attorney, Fani Willis, that's F-A-N-I, Fani Willis, said the probe would examine a now famous call, right, we know this one, in which Trump pressed Georgia officials to find enough votes to overturn his loss in the state. On the call, Trump singled out Freeman by name 18 times, calling her, quote, a professional vote scammer, a, quote, hustler, and a, quote, known political operative who, quote, stuffed the ballot boxes, end quote. By the way, he farted several times.
We found a way in other states later, excuse me. We found a way in other states later, excuse me.
Yeah.
We found a way in other states later, excuse me.
Just thought I'd, replay that for you 1, 2, 3.
We found a way in other
times.
states later, excuse me.
Anyway, what about this Black Voices for Trump business? Well, there's a little bit of explanation on that here, too. Let's dive into that. Why not? We can close the show out with this stuff. Floyd and Douglas were part of a small but active base of black political support for Trump. Cuddy has worked as a publicist in the music industry and managed the campaign for an unsuccessful Georgia Republican candidate for the U.S. House at one point. Floyd launched a bid for Georgia's 7th congressional district seat in May of 2019, but dropped out less than a month later. That July, he joined Black Voices for Trump as executive director, a position he says he held until November 15th of 2020. Trump campaign records show that Black Voices for Trump was an official part of the campaign, much like other groups that target specific voters, such as Latinos for Trump and Evangelicals for Trump. The group's archived website said the site was, quote, paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. Floyd told Reuters that he had an office in the same building as the core campaign in Virginia, where he said he worked on the same floor as the most senior staffers of Trump's political operation. He's a very important guy. Trump called out Floyd for applause while speaking before a crowd at a rally for the group at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta in November 2019. We're delighted to be joined by Harrison Floyd of our Black Voices Coalition, the president said. Where's Harrison? Where's Harrison? Since April of this year, Floyd has worked as managing partner at Commonwealth Holdings International, a Washington-based investment firm that specializes in helping clients invest in cryptocurrencies, according to the firm's webpage and Floyd's LinkedIn page, which is totally up and up, not shady at all. Floyd served in the U.S. Marine Corps for nearly 11 years, ending in 2014, including stints as a machine gunner, a martial arts trainer, and an information operations planner, his LinkedIn page shows. As a spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, the party's national organizing body, Douglas regularly posts blog items on the RNC website. He has used that platform to applaud a Republican-backed election law in Georgia that the Justice Department says is discriminatory against black voters. Douglas countered in an RNC blog post that the law passed this year makes it easier to vote and harder to cheat. I'm sure that's the excuse. During the 2020 campaign, Douglas was active in Georgia for Black Voices for Black Voices for Trump. There we are. According to a Reuters review of his social media posts between August and November of last year, at an event on August 1st of 2020 promoted by the Fayette County Republican Party, Douglas introduced himself as the, quote, regional engagement coordinator for Trump victory, and said he was helping to lead Black Voices for Trump in Georgia. Cuddy, the Chicago publicist, has said her clients have included rap star Kanye West. A West spokesperson said Cuddy wasn't associated with the rapper at the time of the Freeman meeting. Cuddy was a supporter of Black Voices for Trump, her social media history shows. On December 5th, 2020, more than a month after Election Day, she posted a photo on Instagram showing her holding a Black Voices for Trump sign at a Trump rally in Valdosta, Georgia. At that rally, Trump played snippets of the State Farm Arena surveillance video of Freeman and her daughter on a giant screen. The footage, he said, revealed a, quote, crime committed by, quote, Democrat workers. The mission for which Floyd recruited Cuddy and Douglas came on January 4th, at the height of Trump's efforts to overturn the November election, and 2 days before the U.S. Capitol riots on January 6th, the day that Congress met to certify Democrat Joe Biden's election victory. In an interview with Reuters, Floyd described a fevered atmosphere of allegations involving Freeman in December. At the time, Trump and his lawyers were continuing to press false claims that the election had been stolen. Floyd said he received calls from, quote, across the country from people saying they could arrange immunity for Freeman if she were to confess to election fraud. Some of those phone calls that I mentioned were from lawyers and attorneys who were saying, is this true? Does she really want immunity? He declined to identify those attorneys. Asked how he knew Freeman wanted immunity, Floyd cited a lot of chatter and discussion on the internet. He did his own research, see, and that's how he came up with. People were saying, we're hearing that this is what she wanted, he said, but no one could confirm anything. Well, sure they can. He asked Freeman. She says, no. When Floyd spoke with Freeman by speakerphone at the precinct on late January 4th, he told Reuters he believed time was running out to arrange a deal because the election would soon be certified on January 6th. If Ms. Freeman wanted to get a message to the president and wanted immunity, Floyd said, That's really important to get to the right people before the election is certified. It's interesting pressure tactics. Floyd said he reached out to Cuddy and Douglas to approach Freeman. I had spoken to some people I knew and made arrangements for and secured a place where Ms. Freeman could go, he said. A place where no one would know that she was there and no one would harass her there. There's a little bit more here. We'll read just a little bit more while our time runs out on us. Cuddy showed up uninvited at Freeman's door at about 8:30 p.m. on January 4th, police records show. As Reuters reported earlier this month, Freeman told police that during the night's encounter, Cuddy tried to get her to falsely implicate herself in a voting fraud. A Cobb County police report identified Cuddy as an alleged Trump supporter who attempted to get Ms. Freeman to make false claims about the ballot counting. Freeman, who'd been subject to threats and was wary of strangers but wanted to hear out Cuddy, so she asked the police to send an officer to watch over them. According to the police report, Cuddy told the responding officer that she had been sent by a, quote, high-profile individual and that Freeman was in unspecified danger due to the election. Cuddy told the officer that Freeman had just 48 hours to get ahead of the issue before unknown people were going to show up at her home. The officer suggested that the two women meet at the police station, which they did, and at the precinct, Douglas sat with Cuddy and Freeman as the two women talked in the corner of a room. Police body cam footage shows after a few minutes, Cuddy put Floyd on the speakerphone. So they continue with this plot. It just doesn't work. Now it's all uncovered, and now there's even more reporting that we don't have time to share today, maybe further on or later in the week, about just how much coordination there was between the ill-fated Kanye West, quote-unquote, presidential campaign and Trump's, which will come as no surprise to anyone.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Also no surprise to anyone, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam is up next. What he might be reporting on may be a surprise, but not if I spoil it for you by reading it now. No Wisconsin Republican has been held accountable for felony election fraud by forging documents to shift votes to Trump. Why not? Well, let's find out next.